for the 2009-2010 year. We're very happy to be back in Thompson Library in our new space. And today we have a special program by Ann Hamilton, who is an artist and a professor of art here at Ohio State. And I don't know if you know, but Ohio has a program called Percent for Art, where over a certain amount of money, if you're renovating or building a new building, a certain percentage goes to an art installation. And Anne is doing the floor installation that will be in our West Reading Room, which is 2 floors above us right now. And she's going to tell you more about the context of that. So thank you, Anne Hamilton.
All right. Thank you. Hello, everybody. So just like the library, which is like melding 19th century technology and 21st, our presentation today has some of the similar challenges of that joint. So it's a little bit of an improvisation. But as Nancy said, thank you, I was asked why the building was under construction to come in and begin to think about making a project or a proposal in response to the new library. And one of the things that struck me as I came in and saw the new plan is the way that these 2 public spaces, which open up and become the social space that we're in the middle of right now, is the way it was just like a spine of a book, that the old book tower, which is still the center of the structure here, now has these 2 open-faced pages on either side of it. And so the object that we associate to the library is actually in some ways patterning the space that we inhabit now. And I started to kind of respond to that and think about the space of the page and what happens when we read and how much time all of us spend reading. If you think about what quantity of your day is spent actually reading either a screen or reading a piece of paper, and what is the experience of that kind of falling in and that kind of immersion between the covers of a book, or I don't know now how you refer to the screen in the same way, but the vocabulary will come with that. So I started thinking about one of the great pleasures that I take in the library, and one of the privileges I feel like we all participate in as we have access to the library, is the ability to browse the stacks. And what happens when you browse, of course, is that things that aren't next to each other in your mind are next to each other on the shelf. And so as a consequence, often everybody has had this experience of going to the shelf looking for one thing, and the red book on the way drew your attention to it. And that, in fact, is the book that you needed that you didn't know that you need. And I think so much of research, while it may be directed, is the beneficiary of those kinds of gifts and those kinds of coincidences and serendipities. And so I started thinking about how we all use the library really different. We use our reading really differently and for different purposes, and it takes many different forms. So I was going to show you, maybe we'll switch to the PowerPoint. I'm a Mac person, so this is one of those joints, not just of technology, but operating systems. And one of the things the kind of preparing for today caused me to do is go back and look at my own work as a visual artist and look at how many projects I've been doing that have been really revolving around the experience of reading and what happens when we read. This is actually a pinhole photograph of that was taken in the public library in Philadelphia of a series of readers and their 45-minute exposures of people sitting at the table and reading. And I started thinking about what happens is when you read that there's this still time that's captured between those pages that we might not otherwise have. Browsing the stacks. This was actually when everything was in storage. And we all remark on our reading really very differently. You're not supposed to do this to library books. For all the librarians here, no. But I think all of us come up with our own notation system for remarking upon those things in a text that stop us, that catch us in some way. And this is actually, this is from one of my favorite books. This is a book by Susan Stewart. And she wrote it's a book on poetics and embodiment and the body. And I've read this book 3 times, and every time I read it, I try to go back with a different pen, because each reading or rereading, one remarks very differently because you're at a different place in time. And at one point, we actually went into the stacks here, and we started looking for all the books that were heavily marked, had a lot of marginalia in them, and wanted to almost separate those out as a separate collection. But I think somebody's back there filtering as things get checked in and out. But it's very interesting to see the evidence of the reader in the book, and the way that then that kind of anonymous reader comes forward as an individualized hand. Okay, thanks. In my own work, which has mostly been in large-scale ephemeral installations, there's often been a person who activates and animates the time of that installation, and they're engaged in something. And in this case, I don't have the pictures of the installation, but this is a piece that was in New York, and a person was reading, but they were reading with a hot stylus in their hand. So as they read, the text actually burned away and actually became smoke in the air and was reabsorbed by the floor, which in that case was a bed of horsehair. And so this material, which actually grows out of bodily memory, which is from the tail of the horses, actually absorbed the memory of the burned text. And there's a material transformation. But what was really interesting to me in some ways is, as the cursor sort of burned the words away, it was like they were returned to the space, they were returned to air, they were returned to an oral space. And I started thinking about that transformation of word to material, and from a printed word back into an oral space. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you could say that I'm a defiler of books, I suppose. This is from another project that was years ago in... can you see over there? Can you guys see those images? Okay. This was a project in... Charleston, South Carolina, and these books are published. There's a series of blue books that account for the relationship between the shoreline and the sea, and who owns this space in between, which is, I think, the space most artists try to operate in. And there was a figure in this work, and they were erasing these books from back to front. So they were taking the mechanically produced text and leaving a residue, which was the result of a pink pearl eraser and saliva. And it was kind of clearing the space for another story. And in the sort of tradition of altering or using the ground of the page as a place of transformation. This is one where each alphabetic letter is covered by a grain of sand from a beach near where I lived in San Francisco. And there were a series of books, each book which was marked by these grains. And I think that, like, what's happening here is that each of those grains of sand, it's from a black beach, is different. While an alphabet, although we have many fonts available to us, we still have in the Roman alphabet this repetition of recurrent forms. And the sands, none of them repeat. And so the hand of the reader is that enters this reproducible text in a way and marks it through material in this. I don't think I said that very well, but it's the relationship about how does a page or how does a book really reflect with some material trace the mark of the reader, which is always changing and always different, and books come to have different uses in different times. So how does this language, which is printed, become therefore tactile? And one of the projects that I did actually prepared the books by cutting between each line, so that when you started on one corner of the upper left-hand margin where you would begin reading, you could pull out the page in one continuous line like a thread, And in this case, it became yarn-like, and they were wound into bodies. So there was a shift from the two-dimensional plane of the page to the body of a three-dimensional hand-size object. Okay. I haven't done a lot of permanent public pieces. You can see all of these things I'm describing quickly are very process-oriented, and they have an ongoing time, just like reading is ongoing. But I was asked a number of years ago to do a project when they were renovating the San Francisco Public Library, and I worked with a collaborator, Ann Chamberlain, an artist in San Francisco, and we started thinking about how the card catalog is used. We started thinking about how the card catalog is, as you know, not present in this library as a physical object, and the relationship between a tactile form of access and one that's online and is digital. And we're kind of living very much in the middle of that transition, and there's a lot of conversation in the library about that. This is the home of OCLC, where the digital basis of the way we come to have access for books is actually much of that processing happens here. And so what we did was we took one of the card catalog collections that was made available to us by the librarians. And the librarians in San Francisco were very divided. Half of them thought we were like graffiti artists and we were defiling these cards. And half of them thought that it was very poetic. And what we did was we asked the community of readers to select a card from the card catalog. You can show the next one, Jamie. Thanks. And to select a text from the book that the card references or from an associationally related book. So in some ways to enact on the card the same thing that happens when you go through the stacks and you find unlike things together. And out of that we covered, go ahead. These are some of the samples. So what you see is you see the handwriting really literally enveloping all the information that allows you to access that book in the collection and go to the shelf and actually find it.